and welcome to another edition of Our Lady of Good Counsel Video Classics, coming to you from the OLGC Video Vault. Today, the video comes from 2018, when former Michigan and NFL quarterback Elvis Grbac spoke to our men's prayer breakfast group. He gave a fantastic talk. Here it is.
Hello?
We're all kind of in the same boat here. You know, being 47 years old, we see the generations of myself in the 50s and 60s and 70s, but where's the 30-year-olds and 20-year-olds and the teens? Okay, that's the question we have to kind of answer here a little bit. Okay, let me start with this. So a couple weeks ago, I was in Columbus, and I was at a men's conference. They had over 3,000 men. Great turnout. Scott Hahn spoke, and I believe he's coming here at maybe over the summertime or something like that. You have Jeff Cavins was there, and Greg Stefanik, I believe, or Chris Stefanik spoke. Scott Hahn had this one stat, and I had to share it with you guys. Pew, which does polls or whatever within the Catholic, Church, did this study on over anywhere from 1,500 to about 2,000 families. So that would consist of the parents and kids. What they found was this. Say your oldest child within the family was active in their faith. 9% of the rest of the family would be active in their faith. So like I have 3 kids. Parents are not active, but say my oldest son was active. Maybe one other person in the family would be active. What about the mother if she's really a strong Catholic? Over 20% of the family would be active in their faith. Now, get to the male figure, the head of the family. Over 90% of the rest of the family would be active in their faith. 90%. I was blown away by that stat. Everybody has a call. Everybody has a call in this room. And what I'm going to do kind of in my talk, like I said, I have a very limited time because I want to open it up to questions to you guys. I give a talk here in St. Patty's Day coming up on Saturday. I go to Massachusetts. And I have to speak in front of 1,000 guys. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about baptism and a little bit about a teaching point. I like to get back to what really the beginning of it for us. And many of us in here, baptized as very, very small infants, okay? But through our baptism, we are Christ. St. Paul says it great. It is no longer I who dwell, but Christ living in me, okay? But how does that play out in our lives? I'm a Eucharistic minister, okay? It's an unbelievable calling that I have. I encourage all of you, if you've ever thought about doing it, absolutely do it. It'll change your life and the thought process that goes into what that really means, okay? Teaching point. As a Christ in the world, Christ giving Christ to another Christ. How does that play out? Okay? As a Eucharistic minister, I have the ability to give Christ to another person, another Christ. Okay? Change that around a little bit. When you come and receive Holy Communion, Christ giving Christ to Christ. You have to surrender yourself. Not only do you receive the body and blood of Christ, but it's a surrender of yourself to Christ. Okay? Interesting. What about the sign of peace? It's very easy when you're at Mass and you're there with your family, friends, you kind of know what's going on in their lives. But when you turn to somebody behind you or in front of you, you don't know what that person's been through, even within that day or week, okay? To be able to give Christ, the peace of Christ, which the world cannot give to that person, says a lot. And there's only twice in the Bible that the breath of God is brought upon the human creation, and when Christ comes after the resurrection, and he breathes, and he says, "Peace be with you," and he breathes the Holy Spirit upon them. Twice only. Now, we have a rich, rich tradition in the Catholic Church with sacraments. How does that play out in reconciliation? Especially this time in Lent. You know, when you walk into that room, who are you engaging? Christ himself. To be able to not only internalize and discern your failures, but then to be able to go in there and then to vocalize those to Christ and to hear yourself saying those words. Now, the kicker is this. What happens when you walk out those doors on Sunday? And you've got to go into the real world, like all of us have to. How do we deal with people at work, in our family lives? How do we give Christ to other people? That's the real truth. That's what we're called to. Okay? You know, it's interesting. I have this talk coming up on Saturday, and I'm going to have to kind of deviate it a little bit, because I think what you guys want to hear mostly is kind of like my witness. And usually I give a witness at men's retreats and things like that, and it usually goes for about 45 minutes, and I get into really a lot of the detail. But I think what you guys want to hear is kind of what I went through, okay, in my playing days, not only at Michigan, but in the NFL, okay? And I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible because I want to give you a challenge for Lent at the end, okay? Born and raised in Cleveland. Very, very blessed with a family that I've had. My parents came to this country in 1968. I have an older brother and older sister that were born in Europe. I'm 100% Croatian. My parents came to this country, did not speak English, had no money to their name, and already had 2 kids. They had 3 things: faith, their family, and their work ethic. And that's it. That's all they had. If you met my parents now, God bless them, they're still alive, very active in their faith. Our family is very, very strong, extremely strong. When I was 10 years old, okay, and I don't know if I shared this with you guys last night. You know what? Let me tell you this. There's a group here that meets, the college kids that meet here at the parish. I got to speak to them last night, and I kind of gave them my witness a little bit. I have a calling, I think, that age group is where my focus is. And I really want to kind of engage that group, that 20-year-olds, okay? Because I do have I have that. I have the 2 boys in college. But anyways, 10 years old, okay? This is where it all started. Easter Sunday morning at my house is going crazy, like a typical house. You know, everybody's getting ready for Mass that morning. I got ready super early, was lying on my bed in my room, and pulled all the crucifix right off the wall. And we're just laying there, contemplating the cross, not knowing how long I was there, maybe 20 minutes, 30, 40 minutes or whatever. And upon reflection, through my spiritual director that I have now, I was able to realize what had happened. Became very emotional, and realized as a 10-year-old kid what Christ had done for me. Kid in Cleveland, Ohio, Elvis Grbac. What he did on the cross for me, that I could never repay him. And sat there for how long just contemplating that and realizing it. But upon reflection, knowing this, that the Holy Spirit came upon me and planted a seed within me, knowing I think God understood where my life was going to go for some years. And that seed that was planted, bearing fruit somewhat now and continuing now. Okay? Went on into high school, very typical, good athlete. I wish my grades were better. Got to Michigan, was very blessed to be around some great players, great coaches. Okay? That's the one thing, if I could say anything about my career and things like that, I was around good people. From Bo to Gary Muller to Les Miles, Cam Cameron. San Francisco, I was with Bill Walsh, Mike Shanahan, George Seifert, Pete Carroll, you name it, I've had them all. I was around good people. I want to stress this to you. Through that period of, let's say, a good solid 20 years, okay, and I always want to kind of bring this up, is that faith, there's a reason why everybody's in this room, okay, not to hear me talk, okay, but there's an echo within you, God calling you to your faith, and it has to be recognized. And the ordering has to be correct. And I say this for a good reason. Because if we put faith first, which is our true calling as disciples of Christ, family second, and then what you do for a living, what I did for a living for a long time. However, what happens in this room? That work that you do for a living becomes the driving force of who you are. Your family's going to be solid, right? And we'll get to that for a minute. But what happens to faith? Faith gets put on the back burner. And it gets lost. But that's not the correct ordering. Christ calls us to be disciples first of his, before family, before your wife, before your mother and father. He calls that first. And I stress that because I was that guy that had work as first. That's what determined who I was for a long time. And it took some time to really kind of reorder my thinking. And thank God for my family that I had that. Now, retired. I've been retired for a long time. It's been a very blessing. One thing I want to stress is this, or tell you guys about this. I don't know if you guys know my oldest son, Jack. I've got 3 kids. My oldest son, Jack, when he was born, had spina bifida occulta. You guys probably know this story a little bit. If you know what spina bifida is, it's truly when the child is born, there's an actual hole at the base of their spine, and all the fluid is drained through birth. My son had it was closed at the base of his spine. There was like a little fat tissue that kind of ran off of that and ran up into his spinal cord. There was like a little cord that ran up there. And what happens is that all those nerves that come off your spine was wrapped around that. It was my second year in the league, and the #1 pediatric neurosurgeon in the world is in San Francisco, and he's Catholic. Go figure. God works in mysterious ways, right? Had surgery. It was about an 8-hour surgery. If you saw Jack walk in here right now, you wouldn't think anything of it. But I would tell you, he's 22 now, up to about 2 years ago, he still had problems. A lot of people have asked me questions of, why did you stop playing? My son was about kindergarten, first grade, and we are from Cleveland. My wife's my high school sweetheart. Rainbows Children's Hospitals in Cleveland, and had an opportunity to really kind of settle down and give kind of some stability to my oldest son. And talk about sacrifice. It's a no-brainer. Okay? Could I have played more years? Absolutely. That's That's not what I was called to do. I think everybody in this room understands that either your children or your grandkids or whoever it is, you are going to sacrifice and do whatever you can for those kids. That's without saying. Let me say this about Jack too, and this is, everybody in this room is going through this right now. Okay? About a year ago, I was taking my son to confession. We were going to confession together right around Christmas time. He goes, "Dad, I don't think that's the body and blood of Christ anymore." How do you answer that? You know, I'm a big scripture guy, okay? I do Lectio Divina every day. I study, I read. I have to study because it's part of my master's program, okay? But how do you answer that? I got the best advice that I could ever get. Priest just got ordained. He's about 6 months ordained. Good friend of mine goes, "You need to close that book." I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's right there. I can open up to John's, bread of life discourse and to just show it to him right there. Come on. It's Christ's word." He goes, "No, you need to shut that book and show how you live your life with Christ dwelling within you. There's nothing that you could say that will convince him." He goes, "The way you live your life as Christ, the way you receive the body and blood of Christ and live it will go beyond that." And we understand that as parents is this. Our kids see everything that we do. And as a child myself, I know exactly what's going on in my family with my kid, or with my parents. Always. There's always a sense of that. That was the best piece of advice that I could ever get, is that words only can go so far, but our actions go much, much farther. And to sacrifice and to shut your mouth and to live it goes way beyond, okay? And there's a lot of guys out here that I talked to this morning. What can we do with sports in general? Because it's kind of taken over our Sundays, isn't it? I'm living that. I've got a daughter who's a great athlete. She got all the athletic skills. She's going to play at Northwestern. She's a volleyball player the next 4 years. And I've been traveling since she was 10. I make it a point, okay, whatever city I get into is this. I make it a point to grab my phone and find the nearest church and find out what the schedule is. And then tell my wife and my daughter, okay, here's the schedule. And if we have to miss, my wife will miss a game. We'll get to Mass. And then somehow, some way, my daughter's going to get to Mass either on Saturday or Sunday. It's up to us. Always is, always will be. It's always up to us. Okay? Witness. Okay? Let me be very, very honest with you guys. Okay? Born and raised Catholic, not practicing. Very typical story. Okay? March 13th of 2013, Pope Francis gets elected, right? Okay? I'm in church at a 3-day mission. Do you guys know who Father Larry Richards is? Okay. Kicks you in the teeth, right? Yeah, he kicked me in the teeth. Yeah. And I needed it, okay? And I'll be very honest with you. So I went in that night, I think it was the second night, and it was reconciliation. And I don't know if you guys have ever experienced him. Okay, he talks for about 3 hours, and it was a packed church, about 3,000 people. People got up and left because it was harsh. And what they do is they hand you a piece of paper when you walk in, front and back, every sin that you could ever commit. I sat there with my wife and a couple other couples, and I'm sitting there going, check, 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 check. Hadn't been in confession, in a true confession, in a long time. 5 years ago. Bishop Koviak, who is the Bishop of Grand Rapids, I believe, was my pastor at St. Joan of Arc in Cleveland area. Good friend of mine. I went to him in a room like this, in a corner, and sat in a corner with a line of like 20, 30 people behind me, 10 feet from me, and spilling my guts out. I never looked back after that. That took a lot. I took a year of kind of reflection and discernment to the point where I called guys that I played with at Michigan in high school and asked for forgiveness of my past. It was the greatest thing I've ever done. Now, I'm in Washington, D.C., Easter weekend of all things for volleyball. So I've been to Washington, D.C., and I've been to Chicago. Yeah, demanding, right? Holy Week. And you're traveling with your daughter to play volleyball. Go figure. I'm in D.C. about a year after that, 2014. And I go to Mass on Friday. You venerate the cross, right? For some reason, they had left the cross on the front step. And typically they don't do that. They clear out the entire, sanctuary area. Everything is either covered or, gone. But for some reason, they left it there. Everybody had left after Mass, and I sat there for about 20, 30 minutes, contemplating like the cross like I was 10 years old, not knowing it. The only thing that I could say is that I love you, Lord. That's the only thing that I could say to him. And to actually come to say that, especially for me, coming from the family that I kind of grew up in, those words were not spoken to me from my parents. It was shown to me, but never really spoken. So those words have kind of there's a deep, deep meaning to that. And what I realize is this, and even last night, the guy who runs the college program here says, only when you realize that you have a relationship with Christ do you really understand what your faith is. And it really kind of hit me pretty hard. Because I think that's really the key that I think we're all kind of thinking about here. Is that I think there's a reason why we're here for that relationship, to continue to grow. And how do we pass that on to the next generation? Is it the way like my parents go to Sunday Mass and do just what you're supposed to? No. That's part of it. The other part is creating that relationship and showing that relationship how that dwells within you. So that can be a sign to that younger generation. And then being able to speak about it. I'm extremely, extremely impressed about this group that shows up here every Wednesday morning. I don't have this at my parish, but I want to have this because the key is us, 90%. And the more that we can grow in our faith in that relationship and then be able to tell our kids about it, and that's the key, men, is that it's good to be here and doing this. But then what happens when we go to our families? Are we praying with our families? Are we spending time with our families and talking about Christ and that relationship? That's the true challenge. And yeah, what's going to happen? Dad, what are you, a Bible thumper now? Right? You're going to get challenged. How are you going to stand up for Christ? That's truly the key. Okay? I want to leave this with you. And I'm teaching young kids, and I teach at the parish. I have older groups too. Lenten season, okay? This is the challenge I want to leave with you. We as Catholics, we get to the cross, and that's a good thing. We truly understand what Christ has done for us, and we try to live that, okay? My challenge is this to you, to look beyond that cross, okay? Do you truly believe that Christ rose from the dead and is alive today? Do you truly believe that? If you truly believe that, then the joy and the hope of that should change your life completely, even in your suffering, because he conquered all. It is through him that we conquer all, and he is the path. But it's us to give that opportunity for him to be a part of our life. The risen Lord, not the dead, the risen Lord. That's the challenge I have for you, is to live your life because he is alive. And we're called to do that. It should change our outlook in life completely. There's nothing that you can go through in this life that he hasn't done already. And as us men, 90% having an opportunity not only to grow in that relationship, but then to share it. Not just in this room, but in the world out there. That's what we're called to do. Thank you, guys.
And that's all we have time for on this edition of OLGC Classics. See you soon.